So today we're going to start reading the chapter of settlements. This is a very important type of deal because this deal is the one that enables you to go between deals, to go out of one agreement into another agreement. That basically means this is how you would be able to turn a sale into a rental, or turn something into something else, turn a rental into a gift, or the likes of that. The author says it is good to unconditionally settle disputes in property or what leads to property. It is good to unconditionally settle disputes because Allah says in the Quran, وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ, settlement is good. So it is good to settle disputes. Now we're talking about dealings. And just as a side note, when it comes to the issues between people, also it's good to help them to settle their issues. When people have problems between them, and maybe someone comes to you and says, can you help us? Then you can correct your intention to help them to fix their situation. That's a very good, rewardable deed. So it is good to unconditionally settle disputes in property or what leads to property. So property is going to be money. You know what money means. Money means anything with monetary value. Money is two types, bullion and merchandise. Bullion is gold and silver. Merchandise is everything else, including real estate, clothing, animals, slaves. All of that's money. Your cement work you got done on your house, that's money. It is good to unconditionally settle disputes in property. Property here means money. Or what leads to property? What leads to money? What would lead to money? What's something that leads to money? Like killing, because there's blood money involved. And here we said killing, we didn't say murder, because there's different types of killing. You still have to pay blood money. Inshallah, we'll go over the chapter of killing and assaults. Inshallah, it's an important one. We haven't been going over that. For one may take something instead of, and not an additional to, the original blood money. So that's going to be a settlement. Your relative was killed. The one who killed your relative has to now pay blood money to the heirs. You're an heir. The heirs can agree to something other than the original blood money. SubhanAllah, they got some construction going on outside. Hopefully it's not too loud for you. So that's valid. You can do that for killing. You can do that for property, and you can do that for other things. You might say to your wife, how about if I give you this instead of this other thing that I owe you? I owe you such and such. Do you accept for me to give you this? If she says, yeah, I accept, then that's valid. With the condition that it be preceded by a confession. Settlement requires a confession. You can't just jump from one contract to the other contract, from one agreement to the other agreement. It requires a confession, like, I admit that this is your house, but let us settle. I now give you this piece of land for this house. And the other party agrees. Thus, the settlement is truly a sale. So all rules of sales will apply, from described items and usury to cancellation. Or the settlement is a full or partial debt relief. The settlement can be that you pardon him fully for the debt that he owes you, or partially. Or the settlement might be truly a gift, like for one to confess and then be given half of the item without a return. He says, yeah, I confess that it's yours. And then the other one says, okay, you can have half of it. So it's just a gift. You didn't have to. Subhanallah. Now I just remembered, you saw that movie Friday? You remember when Debo stole the guy's bike? He tried to do a settlement with him. He said, yeah, I stole your bike. That's a confession. He told him, well, it could be both of ours. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. And then, or a settlement could be a rental, like leaving the house to him in return for using his horse for a month. You can have this house and I'll use your horse for a month. Now it's his house, not for a month, according to the scenario I'm giving you. It's his house now, and you're going to get to use his horse for a month. So it's a rental. Then after it's done, still his horse. It's his house and his horse, and you're going to be basically renting his horse for a month. That's the settlement. But let me just back up here. It says, so the sale, so the settlement is truly a sale. So let's back up to there, number one. So then, if the settlement is a sale, then all the rules of sales will apply, from described items and usury to cancellation. Yani. So we learned about sales. So you learned about selling and buying described items. So if you're involved in some deal and then something went wrong and now you want to do a settlement and then someone confesses to the right of the other and then the agreement becomes from the first, whatever it was you agreed on, to a sale. But now it's a sale of described items and you have to follow the rules of selling described items. Or there's a settlement and on your side there's gold and on his side there's gold. And you want to do a settlement here exchanging this gold for gold. So that means now you need to observe the rules of riba in sales. And even cancellation. We learned the rules of cancellation in sales. That you have an automatic cancellation that you have a right to as long as you're still in the same session. And you have a warranty of up to 3 days according to the Shafi'i school. And you can cancel a sale if you discover a defect. You have to cancel it immediately though. So all the rules of cancellation also will apply in this sale that came about because of a settlement. And that's it. So settlement's really easy, but it's a very important deal so that you can get out of some muddled agreement and enter into a new one. But since confession is a requirement for a settlement, then we have here subsection, confession, which it is itself a type of dealing because it requires a confessor to the right of another. Whether the confessor is healthy or sick, you don't have to be healthy to confess. And it requires someone who is known in some way for whom he confesses. Someone who is known in some way for whom he confesses. That part's not clear for me. Inshallah, we'll come back to that or I'll have to review it. 3, a subject of the confession, whether it's money or punishment. And statements. And the statement must mean that this right is incumbent on the confessor. Like, I owe such and such to so-and-so. I owe such and such to so-and-so. I owe Fulan $100. That's a confession. Or, he keeps with me such and such amount of money. Meaning he left with me. Fulan left such and such amount of money with me. That's a confession. Just looking real quick before I get ahead of myself. Okay, it's going to come. And the confession cannot be retracted when it comes to the rights of people because people want their rights. So here when we say you can't retract the confession, this is in reference to the rights of the people. The rights of the people. Not the rights of Allah. For the rights of Allah, you can retract your confession. Like if someone went to the caliph and he confessed to committing zina, and then the caliph investigated the issue, and then it was confirmed for the caliph by his confession. Yeah, meaning when I say he investigates means he asks him, are you sure it wasn't just kissing, for example? Maybe you just were alone only. Maybe you were only grinding only. You think it's zina. So then the person tells the caliph, no, it was everything, the whole thing, the deed. So then the caliph says, okay. So then he takes him to punish him. And then let's say his case that he needs to be stoned to death. So then let's say the people surrounded him. They had their rocks in their hands. And then someone threw the rock. Bow, bust him. upside his head. He said, no, I didn't do it. I retract my confession. Then this is valid retraction. Even if he's lying, it's valid. And it's recommended for him even to lie here. That's recommended for him to lie here. This is not recommended for him to confess to this in the first place. But when it comes to the people's rights, you cannot retract your confession. Because the people want their rights. And the confession can be subject to exclusion. That means you can say, I owe Fulan $100 minus 99. That's a valid confession. This means you owe him $100. But you can't say, I owe him $100 minus $100. That's not valid exclusion, and $100 will be confirmed on you. You can't say, now this is about exclusion, not confession. You can't say, I divorced my wife 3 times except 3. That's not valid exclusion. Now, 3 divorces are confirmed. But if you said, I divorced my wife 3 times minus 2, that's valid. Or 3 times except 2, that's valid. That means you divorced her once. So likewise, one could say, I owe Fulan $100 minus 50. That's valid. That means he owes him $50. Or except 50. It is not recommended to confess to the right of Allah, which is what I just told you now, like stealing, drinking, and fornication. For they have nothing to do with the slaves. That's correct. Some people have misunderstanding here. Meaning, for example, what if someone was with your wife? So you might say, he wronged me. He wronged himself here, actually. He wronged himself. He didn't wrong you. Unlike zakah, because the deserving people have something to do with that. Yani, one confesses to a zakah that he owes. Is that a right of Allah, or that's a right of the slaves? The slaves do have a hand in this zakah because there are people who deserve it. There are recipients who deserve the zakah. So if you confess to owing zakah, you can't retract that. So one can retract such a confession which is the right of Allah. So if he stole, then he's about to get his hand cut off. So then he said, no, I didn't do it. Meaning he's going to get his hand cut off based on the confession, not based on that being proven. Then he can retract it, and then he won't get his hand cut off. Or the drinking, so he should be whipped at least 40 lashes, so he can retract, even in the middle of the punishment. So they hit him once, and then he said, okay, I didn't do it. He can retract his confession here. It's valid. So they stop the punishment. Even after they commence the punishment, because Allah is merciful. So the right of Allah, you can retract your confession concerning his right because he is merciful. And the right of the people, you cannot retract your confession because the people want their rights. One is punished even if he retracts, though, if that were by the testimony of witnesses. Like the 4 witnesses came forward to testify to his zina. Then he can't retract because it's not going to be based on his confession. It's going to be based on the testimony of the witnesses. But one cannot be unjustly forced to confess. And here, being forced is less than being forced when it comes to blasphemy. When it comes to blasphemy, being forced is going to be by death threat. For less than blasphemy, being forced is going to be for less than death threat, like long imprisonment or beating or confiscation of his money. And in this case, the confession is not valid. The confession is not valid. So if you understand that, then also you should understand that the plea deal that the kuffar do, that's it's invalid because white person's doing it because they threatened him with severe punishment. So he didn't confess because he wanted to. He confessed because they threatened him. So the confession under threat is not valid. So don't give credence to the laws of the kuffar. The believers don't. But some of the believers are weak in this issue. I remember when I was a little kid and I learned about how they do a deal with someone's supposed to be a criminal. So I said, why did you do a deal with a criminal? Doesn't make sense. Didn't make sense to me. Still doesn't make sense. Our religion doesn't have that. Why they do that? So they can save money and time, not for justice, just to save money. One is punished even if he retracts, if that were by the testimony of witnesses. One cannot be unjustly forced to confess. But if he does confess without specifying how much he owes, not forced to confess, if he just confesses. If he confesses without being forced, without specifying how much he owes, like he says to the judge, I owe Fulan, and that's all he said. Then the judge will tell him how much. So if he refuses to divulge how much, then the judge jails him until he specifies. And just going back to this forcing part, for the kuffar also, in their own minds, a lot of times, maybe not always, they see that they're not forcing you because you can handle the other issue if you want. They say, okay, you're going to do this, or we're going to punish you so severely. So the fact, this other option, we're going to punish you so severely, since that other option is available, they think they're not forcing you. Well, some of them do. In some scenarios, it's not going to work. In the courtroom, it's not going to work. But in other scenarios, it's still going to work. Oh, those are kuffar. They're not guided. What you're going to do? Subhanallah wa bihamdi. Now we are at giving, relinquishing, spending, and supporting. Giving. Giving, it's like a gift, for example. Relinquishing means, like giving, means not keeping. Relinquishing means not keeping, not retaining. Like a man might divorce his wife, or he might free his slave. Doesn't mean he gave a gift, though. Spending and supporting. Is there a question? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Move on to the next section.
Yes.
I don't know if it might be a little bit controversial, but I was wondering if, there are some men who might commit zina with whomever, and as a result, there may be a child that results from that. If it's recommended for him to lie, in this case, would it be recommended for him to deny that child if there's no other?
Is it recommended for him to deny the child? Here, I haven't learned if it's recommended for him to deny this child since the child was born out of wedlock. But he has to make sure that his inheritance doesn't go to this child. So that means he has to tell somebody. Something. He has to tell somebody something. Like he has to say, this child doesn't inherit, for example. And then if the person learned, then he's going to know what that means.
Okay.
Ameen wa fikum. طيب, so wealth is judged on a daily basis, starting at dawn. Meaning, you could be wealthy one day and you could be poor the next day. You could be poor one day and then wealthy the next day. Whatever you are at dawn, though, that's your status for that day until the next dawn. So if you were poor at dawn and then you came into money at Dhuhr time or Asr time or Maghrib time or Isha time, you're still considered poor that day until the next Fajr. When Fajr comes in, if you're now rich because of the money you came into, then you're going to be rich for that day. And every day you are rich at dawn, you're rich for that day. Or if you're poor at dawn, you're poor for that day. So wealth is judged on a daily basis, not yearly basis. That's what the kuffar do too. They see how much money you have, how much money do you make per year? And then they're going to say whether you're wealthy or you're poor. While you could be not poor one day, but you could be poor the next day. Why does that make a difference? Because you have obligations, especially the man. So each day you're going to have obligations to deal with, day by day. The wealthy or rich one has enough money for the rest of a normal lifetime. If you have enough money for the rest of your life, then you are rich, religiously. The poor miskin finds more than half of what he needs for the day, but not all of what he needs for the day. So that means he has something. The miskin one, the poor miskin, he's poor because he doesn't have all of what he needs for the day, but he has some of what he needs for the day. So, for example, if he needs $10 per day, maybe he has 7. This one, he is eligible for zakah. And the impoverished faqir cannot find even half of what he needs for the day. So his case is worse. If he needs 10 per day, maybe he can find 2 or 4. And the bankrupt one is the one whose debts exceed his wealth, as you have come to know. Withholding zakah and withholding support and withholding salary, so the word withholding means you have it, is a major sin. Allah said in a hadith Qudsi, not ayah from the Quran, there are 3 whom I am their opponent on Judgment Day, and whomever I was his opponent, I have defeated. A man who gave a pledge in my name, and then he betrayed. A man who sold a freeman, and then consumed his price. And a man who hired an employee, got what he wanted from him, and then did not pay him his salary. If you hire someone, it's recommended for you to pay him before his sweat dries. Now we have here a subsection on zakah, because you have to give this money. But summarized, so to save the details of zakah for its own book, one may be obligated to give something just for having it, or pay something just for having it. You merely have it, and that's why you got to pay it. Yani, you have it, and other conditions were fulfilled. Like, it's a certain type of money, which we're going to say what type, and you had it for a year, and you had a certain amount of it for a year. Then just because you had this certain amount of money for a year, you're going to have to give some of it. What's that money? For cattle, cattle means livestock, and that means here in particular camels, cows, sheep, and goats only. That's Shafi'i school. Camels, cows, sheep, and goats only. Once I gave a lesson And I said this. A sister told me, so you telling me if I had a chicken farm and I had hundreds or thousands of chickens, I don't have to pay zakah on any of those chickens? I told her, that's right. She said, I don't believe you. So subhanallah wa bihamdi. Bullion, also for having bullion, that's gold and silver. Staple crops, the staple crops, those are the grains or the cereals that are needed the grains or the cereals that people eat that keep them alive, they'll keep you alive. They are nutritious. One person said to me, corn does not have any nutritional value. I said, but it's a zakah. It's something you pay in zakah. And the rule for zakah is you pay zakah for the nutritious grains. Nutritious here means your body can survive on them. That means even if you just eat it alone, only, without eating anything else. Like if you just eat rice only, you'll stay alive. If you just eat wheat only, you'll stay alive. And corn is one of those, so it must then be nutritional, or else the religion's wrong. So it's either whoever claimed that corn is not nutritional is wrong, or the religion's wrong. And the religion's not wrong, so be careful what you believe. Be careful where you take knowledge from. Even though one might think that's not a big issue. It's not the most pressing issue to believe that corn is not nutritional, but you don't want to believe something wrong. And dates or raisins. What's an example of something that's not nutritional though? Like spices. That's not nutritional. If you try to live on pepper or cinnamon, you're going to wither away and die. And one may have to pay zakah. One may be obligated to give or pay something just for having it. For cattle, bullion. So cattle here doesn't mean cows. Using cattle to mean cow, that's American. But cattle originally means broader than cow. So here is not meant by the American meaning. Cattle, bullion, staple crops, and dates or raisins, one may have to pay zakah. Yani, if all the conditions are fulfilled. Whose 8 recipients are named in the book of Allah. And one may also have to pay zakah for his trade, as already mentioned, as well as for the Muslims he supports. That's the zakatul fitr. And that's all there for zakah. It's summarized there, although we have some detailed footnotes there. But we're not going to read those footnotes now. Spousal support. A husband must support his wife when she makes herself available to him. That means she doesn't prevent him from being with her sexually. So preventing him from being with her, that includes her staying in the house but just refusing him and running away from him altogether. Even if she's a slave or a disbeliever, he has to support her. If he married a slave woman, he has to support her. If he married a kafir, so that means she's a Jewish or a Christian, he has to support her. But he doesn't pay zakatul fitr for kafir wife. Pays zakatul fitr only for Muslims that he's obligated to support. Of all dependents, the wife is the only one whose support does not depend on needing it. The wife is the only one whose support does not depend on needing it. That means even if she's wealthier than he is, he still has to support her. We're going to call it support. She doesn't need his support, but we're going to call it support. Spousal support, which we're going to say what it is. Anyone else that a man is obligated to support, that means his children, his slaves, his Muslim parents, if he's obligated. If he's obligated. If he's obligated to support them, then yani, or let me say it another way. If they need it, then he's obligated. That's how it goes. If they need that, then he's obligated. But the wife, even if she doesn't need his support, he's still obligated. How could the children not need his support? Does anyone know? How could it be that his children don't need his support? Nah, then he's not obligated anyway if they reach puberty. Inheritance. Yes. If his child has an inheritance, then he can spend on his child from his child's money. Or even if the child has a gift, inheritance is only an example. Okay, so Hakatha. Of all dependents, she is the only one whose support does not depend on needing it. And it is specified also. The wife's support is specified. Their support is not specified. And the support is based on his wealth. What does that mean? The wife's support is specified. That means he has to give her a certain amount of food and a certain amount of clothing, and he has to give her the lodging. But the others, he doesn't have to give them a certain amount. There's not a minimal, there's not a specified amount. A specified amount. What do you do for anyone else? You just make them full. If you're supporting your children or anyone else you're supporting, and let's just say obligated to support, anyone else you're obligated to support, you just have to make them full. You don't have to give them a certain amount that's very precisely measured. And you just have to give them the clothes they need. And you don't even have to make them own those clothing. You can keep all that clothing. If you provided clothing for your children, those are your clothing. Unless someone else have it. Or you provided clothing to your parent, your Muslim parents. That's your clothing. You don't have to get them new clothing every 2 outfits every year, for example. Just what they need. If they wear it out, you can get them some more. And maybe it's going to come. I'm going to say, though, when the wife has to support herself, then that becomes a debt on him. And no one else. That's not for other than the wife. You cannot make the man pay back child support. That's unjust. If he wasn't supporting his child, then you can't take him to court and make him pay for the payments that he didn't make in the past. You can just make him pay from going forward. And only what he's obligated to pay, not more. And it doesn't have to be cash, don't forget. So this child support thing is highly susceptible to injustice. When we say it doesn't have to be cash, means could be that he just brings his child's clothing when they need clothes, and brings the food, and brings the medicine, and doesn't give the mother a dime of cash. That's valid. So the wife's support is specified, and it's based on his wealth. That means whether he's poor or rich or middle class. So we said what poor means. In summary, poor means you don't have enough money for your day. And rich means you have enough money for the rest of your life, so middle class is in between. He provides her suitable lodging. He does not have to own it because he is not obligated to transfer it to her ownership. He's not obligated to transfer its ownership to her. He provides her suitable lodging. Suitable lodging that depends on the culture. So, for example, if you're from, let's say, United States, then you're probably not going to give your wife a hut with an outhouse. But maybe somewhere that's how people live, and you're going to get your wife a hut. That's normal. He provides her with suitable lodging. That includes having space for cooking and using the bathroom, the lavatory, and sleeping. And he doesn't have to own this space because he doesn't have to give it to her. He doesn't have to make her own it. But he has to give her access to it as long as she makes herself available to him. He gives her ownership of the dominant zakat applicable fresh staple food of the town. Fresh means not stale. Zakat applicable, we just talked about zakat. So zakat applicable, the dominant zakat applicable fresh staple food of the town. Prepared for eating, that means he prepares it. So he might one day grind it into powder and bake it into bread. And he might one day turn it into mush and make oatmeal or something else. And he has to provide for her what the people eat with bread. That varies with the cultures. Maybe they eat olive oil with bread. Maybe they eat cheese with bread. So, whoever said the man has to give his wife bread and water, he's mistaken. Yes.
Does the count applicable mean that it has to be like what we say for the count center, like something that is the staple grain of that town?
Yes.
Or can it be okay?
What? Continue your question. Continue your question. Or can it be what?
Could it be like so if the staple grain like here is wheat, could he provide rice for her?
Yes, yes, yeah. Anything oh. Well, no. Yeah, he goes according to the town. He goes according to the town. So whatever's the dominant one, that's his obligation.
So if he fed her something that was not applicable, then so she got full, for example, then she would just like forgive him of the other sheep so that he wouldn't still have an obligation on him. Like so say somebody's husband gives them meat and rice, which is enough for them to eat, for example. So if she still do something that is of the town.
I think the answer for your question is coming now. Inshallah. Okay. So prepared for eating. So he doesn't just give her the raw grain, and he has to give her what people eat with bread. That depends on the culture. If there is more than one kind in the town, then he gives her what agrees with his status. If there's more than one kind in the town, that means more than one dominant kind in the town, like equal, something that people eat equally, then he gives her what agrees with his status, like whichever one is more befitting of his status. Wheat, by the way, is the most superior, it is the superior grain. Religiously, wheat is the superior grain. Wheat is always valid. And then there's a hierarchy after that. Now I'm not remembering. He offers her meat and fruit of the season occasionally. So occasionally is not very well written in stone what that means. So it means from time to time. So then how do you do that? Means you want to be mindful, the man that is wants to be mindful so that he's not sinful. Even if he doesn't give her meat every day, but he gives her meat from time to time in a way that he doesn't fall short. And the fruit of the season also. And also vegetables goes in there too. However, if on any day she agrees to eating with him in the normal way, I think this is what answers your question. If on any day she agrees to eat with him in the normal way means the way families eat together, usually, then he does not have to give her the specified amount on top of that. And also, let me add here, let's say they're not eating together, but if he gives her something that she accepts, then let him just make sure that she accepts. If it's not exactly the dominant zakat applicable staple of the town that he wants to offer her, then let him verify that she accepts. And if she accepts, then he fulfilled his obligation. And that even includes if he just gives her an allowance. If she accepts, then this fulfills his obligation. Allowance means he says to her, what if I give you this much money every 2 weeks instead of feeding you in this way? If she says, I accept, then he fulfills his obligation. So if you want to follow up with your question, feel free, please. If they eat together, yeah. Yeah, meaning, according to your question, means then she prefers just to have her religious right exactly as the religion specified for her. So if she prefers to have that, then that's what he has to get her. That's her right. He clothes her with what the religious people of his financial and social status clothe their wives. And I want to remind myself and remind you, these obligations, these are monetary obligations, obviously. Well, we're talking about money anyway, talking about deals and contracts. Sometimes maybe crosses the man's mind that, my money's tight. So I remind myself and I remind you, when you spend for the sake of Allah and you have the reliance on Allah, Allah will provide for you. If you have weak reliance on Allah, then build yourself up. Be firm. Don't be wobbly on your feet here. Allah will provide for you, inshallah. So he clothes her with what the religious people of his financial and social status clothe their wives. The religious people of his financial and social status. Social status means, what is he? He might be a statesman, like he might be a senator or something, like, or a judge, or he's an imam, or maybe he's a chief of the tribe, or maybe he's just a commoner. That's his social status, just a commoner. So he clothes her with what the religious people of his financial and social status clothe their wives, offering her clothing every hot and cold season. That means twice per year. Something that covers her body from her neck to the ground. Yani, not just that. We're starting here. Something that covers her body from the neck to the ground. And a pair of pants to wear under the dress. And something to cover her head and neck. With the needed accessories. Needed accessories means like the underscarf that she puts under her scarf so her scarf doesn't slide. That's part of the obligatory support. And with the needed accessories like thread to sew if her clothing rips so she can repair it. And something to wear on her feet, and that's appropriate for the season. And in the winter, she gets a cloak or a coat also. She also gets a seat, a chair to sit in, or seat to sit on. A rich person provides a carpet for the winter and something thinner for the summer. The poor provides a carpet of poor people. And for the summer, he provides a mat. She gets something to sleep upon, a mattress, and a pillow, and a cover, or a blanket for the summer or the winter. If it's summer, she needs a sheet. If it's winter, she needs a blanket. She gets utensils for eating, like a platter, yani a plate, A platter, a plate, a jar, a cup, a spoon, a ladle, I think that's the way to say it, a pot, and the like, even if it's made of wood or clay. She also gets what she uses to question. She also gets what she uses to clean and groom herself, like a comb and soap and a laundry tub and wudu, which is water for wudu, and ghusl water that he caused her to need. If she needs to do the ghusl because of him. And deodorizer for herself, or deodorant if you want. Deodorant or deodorizer for herself. If she lives in a country where people like her go to the Turkish bath normally, something like the spa, then he's obligated to give her the fee for that, but not the doctor's fee. If she was served, meaning not the doctor's fee means medical bills, not his obligation. If she was served in her parents' house before marrying her, then if after marrying her she wants service that he can afford, he's obligated to hire a servant or buy a slave to serve her. Whether he gave it to her or not, yeah, he doesn't have to make her own that slave. But if it was a slave, he doesn't have to make her own that slave, but he puts that slave in her service. And then he must support that one, except in some cases. And he pays for the midwife, the woman who helps her deliver the baby. That's on him. Yes. So in general, he's obligated to keep her accustomed to the lifestyle she had before he married her, if he's able to. So that statement there, that might include some things that are not in what we read. So take that general statement there and keep it in mind. He's obligated to keep her in the lifestyle she was accustomed to, if he's able to. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best. Any question? Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد. Question. Yes. She'll pay for her own medical expenses. Then she can get it somehow, like take a loan, for example. And all of her business ventures, by the way, that's hers. All of her debts, that's hers. Any debt she has is her debt. He's not obligated to pay her debts. We didn't mention here. He only has to provide for her a lantern for part of the night. So that means doesn't have to do something else, like pay electric bill there. That keeps all the lights on day and night. No. Barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullahu khayra. Yeah, and if she wants to work, by the way, also, he can't stop her from working, but he can stop her from leaving his house. He can stop her from leaving his house, not her own house. He has no control over her money. Her house is her money. But he can't stop her from working. So if she's able to work while being detained in his house, then she stays in his house and she works. He can't stop her and he can't take her money. Wallahu a'lam.